History often remembers great revolutions as explosions loud, sudden, unstoppable. But the American Revolution didn't begin with muskets or bloodshed. It began with a secret plot. In the early 1770s, the American colonies were restless. Britain controlled the laws, the taxes, the trade and the future of millions of colonists. Yet in London, Parliament believed the colonies would never dare rebel. They thought Americans were too divided, too afraid, too dependent. But in Boston, a handful of men were planning something that would prove the empire wrong. At the center of this hidden network stood Samuel Adams, a man the British would later call the most dangerous rebel in America. He was no soldier, no wealthy aristocrat, just a determined organizer with a sharp mind and a fire that refused to be extinguished. Adams had a vision. If the colonies were ever going to break free, someone had to unite them. Someone had to create outrage, loyalty, and courage, one spark at a time. So he and a small circle of patriots began a secret movement. They called themselves the Sons of Liberty. They met in taverns, attics, back rooms, anywhere they could speak without British loyalists listening. They spread messages through coded letters and invisible ink. They printed pamphlets under false names. Their goal wasn't just to resist taxes. It was to awaken a nation. But resistance needed to trigger a moment dramatic enough to turn ordinary farmers and merchants into revolutionaries. That trigger came in 1773. Britain had granted the East India Company a monopoly on tea, allowing them to undercut colonial merchants. To London, it was just an economic decision. To the colonists, it was a warning. If Britain could control tea, it could control everything. Samuel Adams saw an opportunity. If the people could be convinced that this wasn't about tea but about freedom, a rebellion could finally ignite. The Sons of Liberty began spreading rumors, meeting secretly, giving fiery speeches in the night. Crowds grew restless. Tension thickened. Boston became a powder keg waiting for a single spark. Then, in December 1773, 3 British ships loaded with taxed tea arrived in Boston Harbor. The governor ordered the tea to be unloaded. The colonists refused. For 20 tense days, the ships waited surrounded by angry crowds, militiamen, and spies. On the night of December 16th, thousands gathered at the Old South Meeting House. Voices raged. Debates exploded. And then Samuel Adams gave a quiet signal. The moment had come. Dozens of Sons of Liberty slipped into the cold night, disguising themselves loosely as Mohawk warriors, not to hide their identities completely, but to send a message. A new American identity was emerging. They marched toward the harbor. No violence, no shouting, just determination. When they boarded the ships, they didn't steal a single thing, didn't harm a single sailor. Instead, methodically and silently, they hacked open 342 chests of tea worth millions today and dumped them into the dark water. The Boston Tea Party was not a riot. It was a calculated act of defiance, secret plan years in the making. News spread across the colonies like wildfire. Some were shocked, others terrified. But many felt something new awakening in their hearts. Unity. Britain responded with fury. It punished Boston with harsh laws known as the Intolerable Acts, hoping to crush resistance forever. But the effect was the opposite. For the first time, all 13 colonies stood together. They formed the First Continental Congress, a step that only a few years earlier would have been unimaginable. Voices that once whispered independence now spoke it openly. Militias trained, communities prepared. The colonies were transforming into a nation. And soon, in April 1775, gunshots at Lexington and Concord would turn a secret plot into a full-scale war for independence. But the true beginning, the quiet moment when rebellion changed from dream to destiny, started long before the first musket fired. It began with a handful of patriots planning in secrecy. It began with whispers, pamphlets, and courage. It began in Boston, under the guidance of men who refused to bow. This was the hidden spark, the silent strike, the secret plot that ignited the American Revolution.